S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a game from a place I probably can't pronounce, made by people in an office that likely smelled of vodka with the stench of piss inside Gatorade bottles wafting through the halls. I assume this because this game must have taken a monumental effort on the part of the developers to even complete, because there's a lot to this game under the hood and just as many frustrations and half-baked ideas. So how does it stack up to today's games, and should you spend a shilling on this thing? Well, let's dig in good and deep, shall we? S.T.A.L.K.E.R feels like an uneven experience if you play it on any other difficulty other than S.T.A.L.K.E.R. There's some UI fuckery that might throw off new players as well, so I think I need to explain a few things before we start. Grass shadows were apparently disabled and could not be turned on without mods. At least that's what I and about 500 other confused forum posters thought. It actually turns out that you have to have dynamic lighting turned on for those sliders and buttons to work. But past Strat didn't know that poor bastard. Instead, I started tweaking an INI-like file to get results, and here's what it looked like before and after. Notice a difference? No? Neither did I. That's because the game sets the INI value to the default whenever I start the game, so I decided to try some mods. I tried out the Autumn Aurora thingy-McDealy, and I got a major graphical overhaul, and a new starting point. It was dark, real dark, and kind of difficult to tell if anything actually looked better. But then I realized something. There's something wrong with the audio. Like, there's this feeling in me now upon hearing it that makes me want to squat down low and put on an Adidas jumpsuit in that order. I just couldn't put my finger on it. That noise you're hearing, that incomprehensible buzz, that's Russian! Or Polish, I don't know. So on top of a graphics overhaul, I'm also getting a lesson in foreign places, with foreign people, with funny accents, and awesome hats. Yet, I went online in search of answers. Apparently all I needed to do was delete my entire sound folder except for 3 specific folders and files. I booted the game up and what do I hear? English!
Well, hello there.
And then it's not English anymore. Reinstall the game, start it up. What the fuck? Why are you still here? The power of Todd compels you! Fun fact, Steam does not delete the contents of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R folder even when uninstalling the game. So, that's fun. So I went into my install folder and deleted it, and yay, my game's back. Won't be doing that shit again. My tip, use full dynamic lighting in the options and thank me in the comments later, or if you're up for it, you know where to find me. My observation is this. With sun shadows turned on, you see a stencil-like shadow drawn over everything, including grass objects, but grass objects do not cast self-shadows even if you enable it. When it's thundering, for instance, without sun shadows on, the effect is this boring gamma shift in the screen space, but with sun shadows turned on, it creates this stencil lighting effect, like it would if there were direct sunlight, and the effect is striking. Dynamic lighting allows you to see moving lights as well as those cast by flickering fires or certain anomalies.
Some asshole said, honestly played 4 hours and would lose to know how people think this is good. Bugs and glitches galore with a terrible story so far. It is a decent atmosphere, I'll give it that, but thoughts about it. Tim, up to the part where you fight people at that arena and are still looking for Sturlock. Probably going to uninstall this garbage, people clearly like it out of nostalgia or something.
Another asshole said, bummer for you, I guess I've been playing S.T.A.L.K.E.R with and without mods since it was released. Get out of here, S.T.A.L.K.E.R, smiley face.
A right asshole said, some people just can't be a stalker, you know?
Next step, because I know you bored little man or woman or manlet, you probably want me to tell you about the difficulty, and let me tell you, I could talk about the difficulty all day. In particular, I could talk to you about people on forums talking about the difficulty of this game. The conversations and misinformation is on the level of a conspiracy theory. There seems to be a disinformation campaign going around that bullets disappear, even though they should register a hit. Lots of people say, nah, that's not it, champ. And then you find out that one person says, yes, I know this happens because I watch it all the time. Then someone pulls out a fucking mathematical formula and starts explaining the laws of thermodynamics. And honestly, you just get to a point where you just decide on a goddamn difficulty and move on with your life because you got better things to do, like play the goddamn game. The S.T.A.L.K.E.R difficulty is the best starting point. You usually won't die in a single hit, and the enemies go down fairly quickly. That is until the end of the game. See, on Veteran and Master difficulty, I noticed a hell of a lot more deaths that I could do nothing about. On Stalker, a lot of that starts to go away, and because your loot table is better the lower the difficulty is set, the higher your chances are to discover supplies that will keep you alive, like ammo, which I never seem to have on higher difficulties. I think the one-shots come from a reduction in resistance for the player, which means that the player needs good armor and some great relics to make up for the 50% reduction as fast as they can, on a difficulty that has shitty loot tables. See the issue here? It's dumb. Play on Stalker difficulty if you want to keep your brain from hemorrhaging. As far as the claim that enemies are bullet sponges, well, I can only say, sort of. Some of the enemies, like these exoskeleton guys, can tank an entire clip point blank and still single burst you down to nothing. But most enemies will go down in 1 or 2 headshots. See, the real problem here is the reticule. Do you see it? See how the lines on each side and top and bottom are way the fuck out here? That indicates your spread. So if you're far away or even aiming down sights, good luck hitting anything. You miss more than you hit at distance, and the game doesn't do a great job informing you of a confirmed hit. The great thing about this, however, is that the enemy is missing just as much as you are at that distance, and when they don't miss, only 20% of their bullets actually damage you. If you crouch, then crouch even lower, then your aim increases. But you move like a fucking sloth, so trade-offs. Basically, it seems like the enemies are bullet sponges, but what seems to actually be happening is you're missing so much that 1 out of 10 bullets might land if you're lucky. Automatic fire also increases your spread, so you have to fire in bursts to keep a decent hit rate. Basically, the most powerful stat for a weapon to have is accuracy, because it doesn't matter how high your weapon damage is if none of your bullets connect with the target. So the name of the game is close your spread, close your distance, be quick to pull the trigger. Once you find a good automatic weapon and decent armor, a lot of your frustrations will decrease, and the game will start to make a lot more sense, and it's at this point that the game starts being a lot more fun, too. As far as shooting is concerned, it has its moments. Holding down 2 buttons to crouch low, all the while trying to peek around a corner, aim, and shoot, feels shitty as the shittiest shit, so I decided to say fuck being careful at a certain point, and I started playing the game a lot more like Counter-Strike. Only crouching when I needed accuracy, and depending on bunny hopping into a room in hopes of catching the target around the corner off guard. You start to feel like a total badass because the AI in this game is a serious highlight, and it doesn't feel like you're mowing down endless hordes of brain-dead fodder. These motherfuckers are dangerous. The AI is very good at flanking you, and they don't tend to stand out in the open to be killed by you either. Whether it's intentional or not, the enemy seems like they use bushes a lot to shoot you from because the bushes do a great job at concealing them. The enemy tactics was a thing that really surprised me because they more than once had me focusing on one enemy, waiting for him to pop his head out, while unbeknownst to me I was being flanked by a shotgunner. That usually ended badly. The AI loves to ambush you around corners. So in order to not be one shot coming into a room, you'll find yourself peeking around corners, slowly entering rooms, using doorways as a source of cover while leaning in to pop off a couple shots. But the aiming. Good God, the aiming is absolutely horrible at times. I've had instances where I'm aiming down sights, popping off round after round, and just watching the bullets fly into everything around the enemy I was aiming at. I've never been a big fan of this type of shooting because it feels less like your skill got you through the fight and more like RNG was smiling on you and therefore you got that headshot you were aiming for instead of getting one shot yourself. Like in an RPG or immersive sim, I totally get this kind of combat because you're attempting to simulate a character getting better at a thing. All the simulation works though because the character's skills through various upgrades ends up being on par with the player's skill eventually and the player is allowed to enter the flow state. In Stalker, there's not a whole lot of ways for you to increase your aim aside from some nebulous, undefined bonus you get from armor. It's frustrating because it makes you feel like the game decided it was time for you to die instead of you making a stupid decision. Stalker has a decent variety of weapons like assault rifles. There's 1 SMG, 3 shotguns, and a handful of sniper rifles, and a whole assortment of body armor to help you pad out your resists, and artifacts to give you small and sometimes large boosts to those same resists. The artifacts are a bit of a letdown, however, as they don't seem to make all that much of a difference because the one thing that will kill you consistently is bullets, and there's not a whole lot of artifacts that will give you much protection from that. There's a middle part to this game where armor and artifacts will make you a walking god, but their usefulness depletes near the end when the difficulty ramps from walk in the park to wishing I was dead. The combat in this game excels in outdoor sections, as indoor tends to be a nightmare for me, but mostly in a good way. There's times when the indoor encounters are a tense struggle of pop the light source while you creep around unseen behind an enemy, and then there's other times when it feels like an elaborate game of whack-a-mole. The game is at its best in those moments during long-range engagements when you're forced to
Serpentine shell, serpentine.
your way through cover to ambush or flank the enemy. The danger of these engagements feels tailored to inspire a careful playstyle, where the player slowly makes their way closer and closer to the enemy. Sometimes the enemy is so far away and well dug in that you are essentially at a standstill, nowhere to go, nothing to do but rush forward and hope for the best. Or hope you get a lucky shot on the guy guarding that one piece of cover that would turn the tide of the fight. Meanwhile, someone's flanking you this entire time. Those kinds of encounters make this game feel so fucking good. And because it was so good, I honestly hated fighting indoors. The outdoor combat was the fucking bee's knees when it was designed well, that is. Of notable mention is this linear trek up a mountain razorback that feels more like Call of Duty with Deus Ex controls. You're running down this one-way street, hallucinating, and your job is basically to kill these guys near some sandbags as quickly as you can. It pales in comparison to some of the more open areas that felt like no matter what way you approached the encounter, each direction had its own set of meticulously designed challenges. The level design is great and has plenty of cover for you to peek and shoot from, which you'll be doing constantly, and sometimes the enemy will surprise you by being somewhere you never thought they'd go. This game reminds me a lot of Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six games, like Vegas and the OG PC games. Especially the way the cover is used against you. The enemy will use it to break their line of sight with you and go into hiding somewhere further back so they can snipe at you when you eventually pop up to shoot at them where they used to be. This game goes from tense firefight to bullet hide and seek. There's times when this game is so tense that I find myself cornering in my own home when I go outside to smoke a cigarette. When this game came out, I remember being impressed by the size and openness of the levels and just how much stuff there was to discover. Not much has changed about that, even though there are games with huge scale that dwarfs the size of this game. Nothing has come close to the density of things there is to do in Stalker, combined with the deliberate open design choices the designers made. Aside from maybe Gothic, which I've praised before for its handcrafted feeling open world. There's a level of care in which encounters are designed that I find myself navigating the map by landmarks instead of by PDA, fully remembering each encounter that I've had there previously, and no two encounters for me has ever played out the same way twice, and the firefight changes even more so when you approach the encounter from a different direction. The AI is unpredictable and dangerous, and that's what gives Stalker the edge over more modern games. You never know what the game is going to throw at you because the battle parameters are constantly shifting. But here's something that fucking sucks about the level design, however. The game relies on a back and forth mission structure that has you spending tons of time going back and forth from mission objectives to a shop to sell your shit and buy new shit because your armor will be shredded by the end of some of these missions, and you have to restock on ammo, which you will likely have none of by the time you kill everyone in your way, as well as some plants, the ground, the walls behind enemies, and some birds in the distance. As far as pacing is concerned, this is a big black mark on the game as it tends to make it a drag to play. But there's another problem with this game that's even worse in the pacing department, and that's the brain scorcher. Now, I've played through Stalker probably twice. Everything is good up until this point, because what happens is that this mission is so long that you'll likely try to do everything in one go, and by the time you get to the end of this thing, you'll be faced with a dilemma. Do I trek all the way back to the bar, sell my shit, get new armor, and restock, or do I try and push through to the end with no armor and scavenging for bullets just to keep up with the killing? When you see just how far you have to walk to get back to the bar, you might be tempted to just push on. Terrible idea. One shots all day long, guys on roofs picking you off before you can find them, radiation eating your health, and bullets eating your lunch. It's a goddamn nightmare. And what's fucked up is up until this point, shit was going swimmingly, and then bam, hit right in the face with constant reloads and frustrating one-shots from the AI, which, you know what? Like I said, I have nothing bad to say about this AI. It kicks a lot of ass. It doesn't feel great, but at the same time, you just kind of have to hand it to the AI. You got me. The art style is decent, especially for a game of this time. When it came out, it had so many options that my computer burst into flames the moment I changed everything to dynamic lighting. And then lighting still looks pretty damn good at times. Where the game's visuals really shine is in the way it handles atmosphere. Blowouts, storms, the sun rising and falling, the occasional twang of a guitar being played by a campfire. There's a lot to love with the visuals. In fact, the game still has some of my favorite heat and fire effects in any game. Look at the way the haze of heat distorts the objects behind it, and the way fire sort of glistens in metal barrels, throwing up embers and dancing shadows. The character models are... For comparison, BioShock came out the same year as S.T.A.L.K.E.R, so this kind of thing was bad for even the time period, and that's likely due to the overly long development period. Also, the original Witcher game came out the same year. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. 2007 was a bad time for graphics. Game artists just got given all these new polygons to work with after having to make toaster-shaped faces for years, and they didn't quite know what to do with all that power yet. And gaming as a whole went through puberty for the first time, pimples and all. So, enough about the character models. You get a pass on that. Everyone was doing it and peer pressure's a bitch. The story is questionable. See, it has all these entries for story bits that fill in the gap that lies in the vast majority of this game, but I'm sure most people will miss this stuff. Basically, what you see in the game is that you're a dude who lost his memory, and the first thing you see when you wake up is an email that says kill a guy. So instead of trying to recover your memory, you say, hey, I need to kill this S.T.A.L.K.E.R guy, and the best way to do that is to steal some documents for a fat man, steal some more documents for a different guy who seems like a lower polygon version of the other fat man, and while you're there, find the dead bodies of your old crew, all the while having wicked DMT trips. Pick yourself up, flip off some switches in a place full of scary shit so you can turn off the thing that's literally boiling your brain and your head with radiation, and participate in a race to the center of an irradiated shithole to find treasure, and a pop culture reference to a movie that no one in the history of ever has actually watched in its entirety without getting up from the couch to take a 2-hour shit break. No one on the planet, sorry, there's only so long you can watch a camera dolly slowly towards a tree while nothing else is happening before you say, yup, my ass hurts, fuck this college thesis, I'm going to culinary school. I mean, the story you experience through gameplay is serviceable, but the entries into PDA offer quite a bit more context for the things you're doing and are about to do. Overall, I think the story is elevated in a major way by the setting, the sound, and the atmosphere that those things create. Music is not a thing, typically. What you hear are distant storms, wind, lightning, gunfire, conversation, but most of the time you're alone with the sound of your Geiger counter clicking and the anomaly detector screeching. That calm will be broken by the scream of a monster you've never encountered before, or the skittering of something crawling on the floor above you. The game is Creepsville, and the horror aspect more than anything is what elevates this game from common to rare in my opinion, because it introduces these supernatural aspects at the right time. Just when the player may be getting bored or frustrated, then comes the hope that terror brings of something new and tense. It's a nice change from the predictability of most shooters, and I think it holds up fairly well, if not being a prime example of Slav jank.